Jorge, from the perspective of the American Chamber of Commerce here and the companies that are already established and looking to move into the Ukrainian market, how would you compare the reaction at the moment and in 2005, when obviously there was a lot more perhaps hype and optimism, whereas now the sense is perhaps more realistic?
Well, I think going back to Tomáš's comments earlier, you hit the nail on the head. I think we're all cautiously optimistic at this point. I think back at the time that the Orange Revolution took place, there was a lot more optimism and a lot more sense of euphoria that things were going to change and they were going to change rapidly. And that unfortunately did not end up being the case, primarily due to the fact of the political paralysis that the country dealt with over the last 5 years, which was compounded by the global financial crisis, which really created a very difficult place for the Ukrainian economy. So I think this time around, the international business community as well as the domestic business community is cautiously optimistic, is going to be looking very closely at the first 100 days of the new president and his administration, and really looking towards, and I think the litmus test will be, are they able to build a political consensus among the political elites and policymakers to be able to move the country forward? And one of the big tests will be the re-engagement with the IMF. And can they get that done, and how long will that take? And that is what I believe the investment community is really looking very closely to, and very much crossing their fingers and hoping that now is the time. We all understand that it has been it's been difficult since independence, and there's been a lot of missed opportunities. And there is a sense now that hopefully the new leadership will grab a hold of these opportunities that are now presenting themselves. There seems to be a lot of critical mass. There seems to be a lot of momentum. And if they're able to do that and focus on what's best for the country, we believe that there's an amazing opportunity to really move the country forward, which will be a huge benefit for Ukraine and her people, allowing the country to take its rightful place in the larger global community.
In terms of the differences between 2005 and today's situation, do you think that the Yanukovych administration could benefit from a lack of expectation, that they're not burdened by this huge expectation of radically changing the country's orientation and position and structure?
Maybe, but I do believe that there's still a lot of expectations, and there's a different type of expectation now, and that expectation is that someone needs to come in and help aggressively move the country out of this deep recession that we're experiencing, which is going to require difficult decisions in regards to implementing a reform agenda. And there's also going to be geopolitical decisions that are going to need to be taken in regards to what spheres of influence and what groupings the Ukrainians will decide to participate with. What is their relationship going to be with Russia? How are things going to happen with the gas consortium? What's the relationship with the European Union? What will the relationship be with the United States? There's a lot of these decisions that are going to need to be taken in the very short term that will really kind of define the path for the future.
Tomáš, there's been an awful lot of political instability in Ukraine for the last 5 years, ever since the Orange Revolution, to the extent where now it's become quite fashionable to talk about Ukraine fatigue, about in Washington, in Brussels, and also to a lesser extent now in Moscow, perhaps. Also the idea that people have become tired of following the ins and outs of Ukrainian politics. From an investment point of view, how important are this soap opera of Ukrainian politics? Is it something that is decisive when people are making investment decisions, in your experience?
I would say in the years between 2000 and probably the middle or end of 2005, it was quite crucial for anybody doing business in Ukraine, whether it's a portfolio investor or strategic investor or a private entrepreneur. You would start the day reading political news, who has met with whom, what decisions have been made, because politics mattered a lot for everyday's business. Since 2005 or 2006, since the Orange Revolution, which has introduced quite a strong level of democracy, politics has started becoming less important for business decisions. And I saw it on myself while until 2005 I would be starting my day reading all the latest news and finishing the day with the same, following what's been happening on the internet. over the last 4 years, I've been usually just catching up a couple times a week with the latest political developments, and it has not mattered so much to me and to the investors that we work with.
Is that because the legal framework has become more structured, more reliable, or is that simply because the politics has become so confused it's difficult for them to get leverage?
You could call it confused, but you could also call it more democratic. The regime until 2005 has been much more autocratic. A lot for the success of your business depended from the decisions made by just a few people. Now, with the introduction of democracy, there is no single person that can change the course of the country to one side or the other. So it has become, the political system has become much more stable.
And more pluralistic, you know.
More pluralistic. That's correct.
Jorge, when you're speaking to people who are looking at Ukraine as a potential investment location, is that one of the priorities, the political situation? Are they focused on the stability issue and the democracy issue, or do you find they're more interested in economic indicators?
Well, I find, to go along with what Tomasz was saying, I see two distinct groupings. The first is those that are already here, the strategics, the portfolio, as well as the private entrepreneurs that are already here, that have already traveled up the learning curve and understand what Ukraine is about, have built the relationships that are necessary to be successful, have focused a lot less on politics and have focused more on different policy changes that have happened in the regulatory and legislative environment that might impact their business, and have looked for ways to try to positively influence those types of situations. So they're not so concerned about politics, as Tomasz was saying. But I think on the other side, some of the new investors that haven't traveled the learning curve, that don't really know that much about Ukraine. Some of them, especially from large strategic or multinational companies, have tended to be a little bit more reticent and have tended to have more of a wait-and-see attitude, waiting for there to be some type of clarity within the political sphere. But at the same time, there's also a clear timeline there. So some companies that have been on the border looking into Ukraine and wondering if they should be here or not, but have been using the political instability as a litmus test to see whether or not they should enter. A lot of them have now said that, we're not expecting any major political stability anytime soon, so we might as well go ahead and execute, because we can't afford not to be in a country like Ukraine with 47 million consumers on the border of the new larger Europe, with a potential free trade agreement, free trade area with the European Union as part of the association agreement, and a very strong trading partner, Russia, to the north.